A delivery girl walked into the wrong room at precisely the wrong moment and inadvertently salvaged a mafia boss's $40 million deal with a single sentence uttered in flawless Japanese. He pressed her, demanding to know her true identity. Her response? Nobody. This piqued his interest, and he resolved to transform her into somebody. Now, his entire empire bowed before the girl who had simply arrived with takeout. The crystal chandelier suspended above the mahogany table quivered as Lorenzo Vitali slammed his fist down with considerable force. Tell them we accept their terms, Marcus, now. His translator, Marcus Webb, a gaunt man with beads of sweat shimmering on his forehead, nervously shuffled through his notes. The three Japanese businessmen seated across from them remained utterly still, their expressions as impassive as if sculpted from stone. The man in the center, Mr. Takahashi, was impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that likely cost more than the average person's car. His gaze was frigid. Yes, Mr. Vitali. Marcus cleared his throat and began to speak in halting, imperfect Japanese. Lorenzo didn't need to grasp the nuances of the language to sense that something was amiss. He had built his formidable empire on his keen ability to read faces, and at that moment, Mr. Takahashi's face was shifting from stone to glacial ice. The Japanese man stood abruptly, his movements sharp and decisive. The other two followed suit, moving like silent shadows. Wait, Lorenzo commanded, raising his hand in a gesture to halt them. But Marcus was already stammering, his Japanese becoming increasingly frantic and clumsy. Mr. Takahashi's response was equally sharp, clipped, and laced with anger. What did he say? Lorenzo demanded, his voice taut. Marcus turned a shade paler. He said we've insulted his honor. I think I might have confused the words for partnership with something else, something bad. You think? Lorenzo's voice dropped to a near whisper, a tone far more terrifying than any shout. This deal is worth $40 million, Marcus. You think you insulted them? 6 of Lorenzo's men stood silently along the walls, their hands hovering near their concealed weapons. But this wasn't a problem that could be solved with brute force. It required words, the precise words spoken in the correct language with the appropriate tone and inflection. Mr. Takahashi spoke again, his voice like the rasp of a blade being drawn from its sheath. Marcus swallowed hard. He's saying that the Vitali family is run by fools and amateurs, that we've wasted his time. He's leaving. Lorenzo's jaw clenched, his muscles tight. 3 months of painstaking negotiations, now utterly ruined. His counsel would never allow him to live this blunder down. The other families would detect weakness like sharks sensing the scent of blood in the water. The Japanese delegation began to move toward the door. Just then, a knock sounded. Not now, Lorenzo barked, his voice laced with fury. The door opened regardless. A young woman stepped inside, perhaps 25 years old, wearing a vibrant red jacket embroidered with a golden dragon. She carried 2 large bags filled with takeout food, and her dark brown hair was haphazardly pulled back into a messy ponytail. She looked utterly out of place in the opulent room that reeked of expensive cologne and barely suppressed violence. Sorry, I've got an order for, She stopped, taking in the scene. Her green eyes darted from Lorenzo to the Japanese men. Oh, bad time. Get out. One of Lorenzo's guards growled menacingly, but Mr. Takahashi had turned, his attention now fully focused on the delivery girl. He glanced at the takeout bags, then back at the girl, and spoke to her in Japanese, presumably instructing her to leave as well. The delivery girl blinked. Then, to everyone's utter astonishment, she responded in perfect, fluid Japanese. The room fell utterly silent. Mr. Takahashi's eyebrows arched, displaying the first flicker of emotion he'd shown all evening. He spoke again, a longer phrase this time, almost as if testing her. The girl set down the bags and replied, her tone respectful yet confident. She even offered a slight bow, precisely matching the depth that Lorenzo had observed Mr. Takahashi use earlier. What the hell is happening? Lorenzo muttered under his breath, bewildered. The conversation continued, flowing effortlessly between them. The delivery girl spoke, and Mr. Takahashi listened intently, then responded in turn. His shoulders, which had been rigid with offense, began to relax noticeably. One of his associates even cracked a smile. Marcus stood frozen, his mouth agape in utter disbelief. Finally, the girl turned back to Lorenzo. Okay, so your guy here basically told them that your family treats business partners like dogs and that you're basically spitting on their traditions. That's not what you wanted to say, right? Lorenzo stared at her, dumbfounded. No, that's not even close to what I wanted to say. Yeah, I figured. She turned back to Mr. Takahashi and spoke again in Japanese, her hands moving gracefully as she explained something. The palpable tension in the room was rapidly dissipating like morning fog. Mr. Takahashi nodded slowly in understanding. He responded, and the delivery girl translated without missing a beat. He says he appreciates the clarification. He understands that your translator was incompetent, not that your family was intentionally disrespectful. He's willing to continue the discussion, but only if I translate for you. Lorenzo couldn't mask the surprise in his voice. She simply shrugged. I mean, unless you want to lose $40 million over the word for dog versus partner, it's your call. Lorenzo glanced at Marcus, who appeared to be on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown. Then he looked at his guards, who were just as bewildered as he was. Finally, his gaze settled on Mr. Takahashi, who was watching him with an expression that plainly said, "Choose wisely." Fine, Lorenzo conceded. Marcus, sit down and shut up. You, he said, pointing directly at the delivery girl. What's your name? Sophia Carter. Sophia Carter, you just became my translator. Don't screw this up. For the next 40 minutes, Sophia Carter, who had walked in merely to deliver orange chicken and lo mein, flawlessly negotiated the most critical deal of Lorenzo Vitali's entire career. She didn't just translate the words. She skillfully navigated the complex cultural landscape. When Lorenzo said something too bluntly, she artfully softened his language. When Mr. Takahashi implied an insult, she deftly framed it as a question. She effortlessly grasped subtle cultural nuances that Marcus would never have understood, even with the aid of a comprehensive dictionary. By the time the Japanese delegation rose to leave, they were warmly shaking Lorenzo's hand. Mr. Takahashi spoke a few words directly to Sophia, bowed to her specifically, and then departed with his associates. The door clicked shut behind them. Lorenzo immediately turned to face her, his eyes narrowed. Who the hell are you, really? Sophia picked up her delivery bags. Just someone who's good with languages, she said with a slight smile. But there was something guarded, almost wary, lurking behind her eyes. That'll be $42. $50 for the food, by the way. Lorenzo pulled out his wallet and handed her 5 $100 bills. Keep the change and leave your number with Tony at the door. Why? Because you just saved my reputation and made me a lot of money. He studied her intently, his gaze unwavering. And I want to know how a delivery girl speaks Japanese like she grew up in Tokyo. Sophia pocketed the money, her expression unreadable. Long story. I've got time. I don't. She headed for the door, then paused and glanced back at him. But if you need a translator again, I guess I know where to find you. She exited the room, leaving Lorenzo standing alone in the opulent space, his mind racing with possibilities. His instincts, the same instincts that had kept him alive and thriving in this cutthroat business for 20 years, were screaming that Sophia Carter was not at all who she appeared to be. But right now, she was precisely what he needed. Tony, he called out, his voice sharp. His guard stepped into the room. Boss? Find out everything about that girl. Everything. 3 days later, Tony dropped a thin folder onto Lorenzo's desk. Everything we could find on Sophia Carter. Lorenzo opened it, his expectations high. The contents were disappointingly sparse. A driver's license, an address in Queens, employment records from Dragon Walk and 2 other restaurants prior to that. No criminal record, no college degree, no social media presence worth mentioning. That's it. Lorenzo frowned, his disappointment evident. This girl speaks fluent Japanese and all we've got is this? She's clean, boss. Too clean if you ask me. Tony shifted his weight, a subtle indication of his unease. 26 years old. Moved around a lot as a kid. Foster care system. No family we can trace. She's been working delivery jobs for the past 4 years. Lorenzo stared at the photo on her driver's license. Same messy ponytail. Same guarded eyes. Nobody learns Japanese delivering egg rolls. Yeah, well, she also speaks Mandarin, Italian, and Russian, according to her coworker. The guy at Dragon Walk says she's weird. Always reading books on her breaks. Keeps to herself. Before Lorenzo could respond, his phone buzzed. Its vibration a jarring interruption. Marcus Webb's name flashed across the screen. What? Lorenzo answered, his voice curt. Mr. Vitali, we have a problem. Marcus sounded panicked, his voice trembling slightly. I was reviewing our previous contracts with the Takahashi Group. The quarterly terms from the past 2 years. I think I've been translating the profit split wrong. Lorenzo sat up straight, his senses on high alert. Wrong? How? We were supposed to be getting 45%. I've been telling you it was 35%. The room fell utterly silent, the air thick with tension. You're telling me, Lorenzo said slowly, each word carefully measured, that for 2 years, we've been leaving 10% on the table because you can't do your job? The kanji characters were similar, and Lorenzo hung up abruptly, cutting off Marcus's stammering excuses. He did the quick math in his head. 10% of their Japanese imports over 2 years. That was somewhere around $8 million missing, all because of a case of egregious mistranslation. His phone rang again almost immediately. It was Mr. Takahashi's assistant. Lorenzo answered, bracing himself for another problem. Instead, the assistant, speaking through a professional translator, sounded almost cheerful. Mr. Takahashi wanted to arrange another meeting. He had been reviewing the terms with his own team, and there were historical discrepancies he wished to discuss. Would tomorrow work? Lorenzo agreed and ended the call, his mind spinning with possibilities. He dialed Sophia's number, the one she'd reluctantly left with Tony, though she probably regretted it now. Hello. Her voice was cautious, almost hesitant. I need you again tomorrow. Same place. 2 p.m. I work tomorrow. Not anymore. I'll pay you $5,000 for 2 hours. Silence hung in the air on the other end of the line. Then, what's the catch? No catch. Just translation. Lorenzo paused, then added, and maybe some answers. I don't owe you answers. You do if you want the money. Another pause. Fine, but I'm not doing anything illegal. Neither am I. Lorenzo lied smoothly, without a hint of hesitation. See you tomorrow. Sophia arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in jeans and a plain black sweater instead of her usual delivery uniform. She looked younger, somehow less guarded. But when she met Lorenzo's gaze, that familiar wall of reserve went right back up. Before we start, Lorenzo said, leaning forward slightly, I need to know something. Where did you learn Japanese? Books. Nobody learns a language that well from books. Sophia sat down across from him, her expression carefully neutral. I had time. A lot of time. Foster care isn't exactly exciting. And Russian, Italian, Mandarin? Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Is this the meeting or an interrogation? Can't it be both? Mr. Takahashi arrived before she could answer, his associates trailing behind him. But this time, his demeanor was noticeably different, almost apologetic. He bowed to Sophia first, then to Lorenzo, a subtle gesture of respect and acknowledgement. The conversation that followed was delicate, a carefully choreographed dance of words and gestures. Through Sophia's impeccable translation, Mr. Takahashi explained that his own team had discovered the mistranslations. He was deeply embarrassed. In Japanese business culture, such errors reflected poorly on both parties, damaging their reputations and trust. However, he wanted to make things right, to rectify the situation and restore their partnership. He's offering to pay you the missing $8 million. Sophia translated, her voice even and professional. plus an additional $2 million as an apology for the confusion. Lorenzo kept his face impassive, giving away nothing of the shock and elation he felt inside. $10 million. Just like that, the negotiations continued, flowing smoothly under Sophia's expert guidance. She didn't just translate the words. She caught the subtle nuances, the unspoken implications that could make or break the deal. When Mr. Takahashi used a specific phrase, she explained to Lorenzo that it meant future deals would have more favorable terms. When Lorenzo tried to push too hard, she gently reframed his demands in a way that didn't offend, maintaining the delicate balance of the conversation. By the end of the meeting, they had not only recovered the lost money but had also secured a new contract worth $20 million annually, $5 million more than the previous terms. Mr. Takahashi left satisfied, a genuine smile on his face. Lorenzo sat back in his chair, staring at Sophia, his mind still reeling from the sheer audacity of what had just transpired. "You just made me $30 million. She simply shrugged, seemingly unfazed by the magnitude of her accomplishment. "I just translated." "No, you did more than that. You knew exactly what to say, how to say it." Lorenzo leaned forward, his eyes fixed on her. "So, I'm going to ask you one more time. Who are you, really?" Sophia met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I'm someone who learned that words are power. When you've got nothing else, no family, no money, no home, you find power where you can. For me, it was languages. That's a nice story. It's the truth." "Maybe." Lorenzo pulled out an envelope from his inside pocket and slid it across the table toward her. "Double what I promised." Sophia opened the envelope, counted the bills quickly and efficiently, then looked up at him, her eyebrows slightly raised. "Why?" "Because I want you to work for me, not just as a translator. I need someone I can trust in these meetings." "You don't trust me. You just said so." "No." Lorenzo agreed, his voice steady. "But I need you. There's a difference." Sophia stood, pocketing the envelope with a decisive movement. "I'll think about it." As she walked toward the door, Lorenzo called out, his voice carrying across the room. "Sophia, if you're running from something, you should know. I'll find out eventually." She paused, her hand resting on the doorknob. "I'm not running from anything, Mr. Vitali. I'm running toward something better." The door closed behind her with a soft click. Tony emerged from the side room, his expression curious. "Want me to keep digging?" Lorenzo nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the closed door. "Yeah, but carefully. I don't want to spook her." "Not yet, anyway." The council room reeked of stale cigar smoke and old money, a familiar scent that spoke of power, influence, and tradition. 6 men sat around the massive mahogany table, the heads of the Vitali family's various operations. These weren't mere foot soldiers or enforcers. These were Lorenzo's most trusted advisors, men who'd been with him since he took over from his father 15 years ago. And right now, they were looking at him as if he'd completely lost his mind. "A delivery girl," Vincent Russo said, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the room. He was Lorenzo's oldest friend, a relationship that afforded him the privilege of speaking his mind freely, even when it wasn't what Lorenzo wanted to hear. "You replace Marcus with a delivery girl?" Lorenzo poured himself a generous measure of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling in the glass. "I replaced Marcus with someone who doesn't cost me millions of dollars in mistakes." "She's nobody?" Anthony Costa interjected, his voice laced with skepticism. He ran the family's lucrative construction business, the ostensibly legal front that laundered a significant portion of their illicit income. "No background, no connections, no family. She could be anyone. FBI, CIA, hell, she could be working for the Calibri family for all we know." "She's not," Lorenzo said calmly, his voice unwavering. "How do you know?" Vincent leaned forward, his expression concerned. "Because she speaks a few languages? Lorenzo, we've built this family on trust. On blood. She has neither. She's got skills we need," Lorenzo countered, his tone firm. "Skills we can buy from a dozen professional translators who actually have credentials," Michael Greco said, his voice sharp and incisive. He was the youngest of the council members at 42, but he was as quick-witted and ruthless as any of them. Real translators, not some girl who showed up with Chinese food. Lorenzo took a long drink of his whiskey, letting the smooth liquid burn its way down his throat. Those real translators lost us $8 million. And she's making you look weak. Vincent shot back, his voice rising in frustration. The other families are already talking. Lorenzo Vitali needs a waitress to save his business deals. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like I'm smart enough to use the right tools for the job, Lorenzo said, his voice laced with steel. It sounds like you're desperate, Anthony said, stubbing out his cigar with more force than necessary, the embers glowing red in the ashtray. It sounds like the Vitali family can't handle its own affairs. Every boss in New York is watching this, Lorenzo. They're waiting to see if you've gone soft. Let them watch, Lorenzo said. But there was a dangerous edge to his voice now, a warning that they were treading on thin ice. And what happens when she decides to talk? Michael added, his tone laced with apprehension. She sat in that room with Takahashi. She heard everything. Numbers, routes, timelines. You gave a complete stranger access to our entire Japanese operation. She signed an NDA, Lorenzo stated, as if that settled the matter. Vincent actually laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. An NDA? You think a piece of paper means anything in our world? Lorenzo, listen to yourself. This isn't a corporate boardroom. This is the family. We handle problems the old way, not with lawyers and paperwork. Lorenzo set his glass down hard enough that it cracked, the sound sharp and startling in the tense silence. Nobody touches her. Is that clear? The room went utterly silent. The only sound the faint ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. So, it's like that, Vincent said quietly, his eyes fixed on Lorenzo. You're protecting her. I'm protecting Anassa, Lorenzo corrected him, his voice cold. No, Vincent said, standing abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're protecting a girl who smiled at you and made you feel like a hero. I've known you 20 years, Lorenzo. I know when you're thinking with your head and when you're not. Careful, Vincent. Someone has to say it. Your father would never have. My father's dead. Lorenzo's voice was like ice, each word dripping with menace. I run this family now, and I say she stays until I decide otherwise. Anthony exchanged a knowing look with Michael, their faces grim. For how long? Until she's not useful anymore. And what happens when the other families start asking questions? Michael pressed, his voice insistent. When they want to know why Lorenzo Vitali suddenly needs a translator who isn't even Italian. You think that doesn't make us look weak? I think, Lorenzo said slowly, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his counsel, that I just secured a $20 million contract and recovered $8 million in lost profit. What did any of you do this week? The barb landed with brutal precision, silencing any further objections. Vincent sat back down, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. We're just trying to protect you, Anthony said, his tone softening slightly now, attempting to mend the fractured atmosphere. Protect the family. This girl, Sophia, she's a liability. We can't trust her. At least let us do a deeper background check, Michael pleaded. Let us bring in our people, the ones who can really dig. Lorenzo considered this, weighing his options. His pride was screaming at him to refuse, to tell them all to go to hell and run his family his way. But they weren't wrong. Sophia Carter was a walking enigma, a mystery wrapped in a puzzle. And in his world, mysteries had a nasty habit of getting people killed. Fine, he said finally, his voice grudging. But you do it quietly. I don't want her knowing we're looking into her past. And if we find something, Vincent asked, his eyes searching Lorenzo's, then we deal with it. How? Lorenzo met his old friend's gaze, his expression grim. However, we need to. Vincent nodded slowly, but he didn't look satisfied. None of them did. One more thing, Michael said, breaking the tense silence. The Calibri family reached out. They want a meeting next week. Brooklyn territory dispute. What does that have to do with Sophia? Lorenzo asked, his suspicion immediately piqued. They specifically mentioned her, Michael said, his voice low. Said they heard you had a new translator who could speak any language. They want to know if you'd be willing to loan her out for a meeting with their Russian contacts. Lorenzo's instincts flared, warning him of imminent danger. The Colibri family didn't ask for favors. They probed for weaknesses, testing the boundaries of their rivals. Tell them no. That'll offend them. I don't care. Anthony sighed heavily, running a hand through his thinning hair. Lorenzo, we can't afford a war with the Colibris right now. Not with the Japanese deals expanding. We're stretched thin as it is. Then we'll stretch thinner. Sophia Carter works for me. Nobody else. Vincent stood again, buttoning his suit jacket with a decisive snap. You're making a mistake. Not about the Colibris, though that's going to come back to bite us, but about this girl. She's going to cause problems. She already has, Lorenzo admitted, his voice weary. But she's also solving them, for now, Vincent countered, his gaze unwavering. But what happens when the cost gets higher than the profit? He left without waiting for an answer, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The other council members filed out behind him, their expressions a mixture of concern and disapproval, leaving Lorenzo alone with his cracked glass and the lingering smell of cigar smoke. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. A text from Sophia. Thought about your offer. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Lorenzo smiled despite himself, a flicker of amusement lighting up his dark eyes. Even his counsel couldn't intimidate him the way this seemingly ordinary delivery girl could intrigue him. He texted back, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Name them. The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow in person and bring coffee. The good kind. Lorenzo laughed, a real laugh, full and genuine. The first one in days. Vincent was right about one thing. Sophia Carter was undoubtedly going to cause problems. But maybe that was exactly what Lorenzo needed. Sophia arrived at the Vitali estate the next morning, fully expecting another tense business meeting, a continuation of their complex dance of negotiation and veiled suspicion. What she got instead was utter chaos, a scene that defied all her expectations. A small boy, maybe 7 years old, was sitting cross-legged on the cool marble floor of the expansive foyer, surrounded by a chaotic swirl of crumpled papers and brightly colored textbooks. He had dark, curly hair that mirrored Lorenzo's, and the same intense, piercing eyes. But where Lorenzo's eyes were calculating and assessing, this child's were filled with pure, unadulterated frustration. I hate French, the boy shouted at no one in particular, his voice echoing through the vast space. It's stupid, and I'm never going to France anyway. Tony, the imposing guard who had reluctantly let Sophia in, looked utterly helpless, his usual stoic expression replaced with a mixture of exasperation and sympathy. Luca, your tutor will be here in an hour. Just wait. I don't want the tutor, Luca wailed, his voice rising in pitch. She smells like old cheese, and she makes me say the same stupid words 100 times. Sophia bit back a smile, struggling to contain her amusement at the unexpected scene. She cleared her throat softly to announce her presence. Luca looked up, startled to see a stranger standing there. Who are you? Sophia. I work for your dad, she said, offering him a small, reassuring smile. She crouched down to his level, examining the scattered papers spread across the floor. French verb conjugations. Let me guess. You're stuck on irregular verbs. Luca's eyes widened in surprise and recognition. How did you know? Because irregular verbs are the worst part of any language, Sophia explained, her voice gentle and understanding. They don't follow the rules, which makes them incredibly annoying and frustrating. Luca's eyes lit up, his face brightening with a spark of shared understanding. Yes, that's exactly it. Why can't they just be normal? Because languages like to keep us on our toes, to challenge us and make us think, Sophia said with a wink. She picked up one of his worksheets, examining it closely. You know what helps me? I turn them into a song. Want to try? Before Luca could even answer, Lorenzo's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. Luca, what have I told you about doing homework in the hallway? Sophia stood quickly, her movements fluid and graceful, as Lorenzo descended the grand staircase, his presence radiating power and authority. He was dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, trading his usual tailored suit for dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, no jacket. It made him look younger, less intimidating, and surprisingly approachable. "Papa, this lady knows about irregular verbs," Luca announced, his voice filled with newfound enthusiasm. Lorenzo's eyebrows rose in surprise, his gaze shifting to Sophia, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Does she? I was just—" Sophia started to explain, but Luca interrupted her, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Can she help me, please? Mrs. Dutchin makes everything so boring, and she gets mad when I ask questions." Lorenzo looked at Sophia, his expression unreadable, a complex mixture of surprise, curiosity, and perhaps even a hint of gratitude. "You speak French, too, among other things." "Of course you do," he sighed, a hint of resignation in his voice. He turned back to his son, his tone firm but gentle. "Luca, Sophia is here for a business meeting, not to do homework." "But Papa, the meeting can wait," Sophia heard herself say, the words slipping out before she could fully consider their implications. "If that's okay with you, Mr. Vitali." Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, his gaze intense and unwavering. "You don't have to. I know, but irregular verbs really are the worst," she said with a wry smile. "I'd feel guilty leaving him to suffer alone." Luca jumped up from the floor, his face alight with excitement. "Yes, come on. We can use the library. It's way better than the hallway." Before either adult could protest, he grabbed Sophia's hand and pulled her toward a set of imposing double doors, his small body practically vibrating with energy. The library was truly enormous, a breathtaking space that spoke of wealth, knowledge, and a deep appreciation for the written word. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with countless volumes bound in leather and gold. Plush leather chairs were strategically placed throughout the room, inviting readers to curl up and lose themselves in a good book. A magnificent fireplace dominated one wall, its intricate carvings a testament to the skill and artistry of its creators. The fireplace alone probably cost more than Sophia's annual salary. Luca dumped his books unceremoniously on a large mahogany table and looked at her expectantly, his eyes shining with anticipation. "Okay," Sophia said, settling into a chair, trying to appear unfazed by the sheer opulence of her surroundings. "Show me what you're stuck on." For the next 30 minutes, she worked with Luca through his French homework, guiding him through the treacherous terrain of irregular verbs. But she didn't just help him memorize the conjugations. She made it fun, transforming the tedious task into an engaging and even entertaining experience. She taught him a silly song for the verb être, complete with goofy gestures and exaggerated facial expressions. She explained that au revoir sounded like why asterisk, because if you had something you always wanted to have more. She drew ridiculous pictures to help him remember the tricky verb endings, using visual cues and silly associations to make the information stick. Luca laughed, really laughed, a bright and genuine sound that echoed off the library walls, filling the room with joy. "You're so much better than Mrs. Dutchin," he declared, his face beaming. "Can you be my teacher instead?" "I'm not a real teacher, Luca," Sophia said gently. But you know so many languages," Luca exclaimed, his eyes wide with wonder. "Tony told me you speak Japanese and Chinese and Italian and Russian." "Tony talks too much," Sophia said, but she couldn't help smiling. "How many languages do you know?" She counted in her head, mentally ticking off the languages she had mastered over the years. 10, maybe 11 if you count the bits of Korean I picked up. Luca's jaw dropped in astonishment. "That's like a superpower. It's really not that special?" Sophia demurred, trying to downplay her linguistic abilities. "Are you kidding?" Luca exclaimed, his voice incredulous. "I can barely do one." He leaned forward conspiratorially, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Can you teach me some? Not for school, just for fun." "What do you want to learn?" Sophia asked, her curiosity piqued. "Something cool. Like, how do you say hello in all of them? Sophia couldn't help herself. She launched into a whirlwind tour of international greetings, effortlessly rattling off the words in a variety of languages. Asterisk konnichiwa asterisk. And I how. Zdravstvuyte. Ciao. Hola. Guten Tag. Ahlan wasahlan. Luca tried to repeat each one, butchering most of them in the process, but his enthusiasm never wavered. He stumbled over the pronunciations, mispronounced the tones and garbled the sounds, but he kept trying, his determination unwavering. Now teach me how to say my dad is the coolest, Luca said, his expression suddenly serious. Why? Because it's true, he said simply, his voice filled with unwavering conviction. Everyone thinks he's scary, but he's not. He's just protective. Since Mama died, he worries a lot. Sophia's chest tightened with a sudden wave of empathy for the little boy and his formidable father. I'm sorry about your mom. Luca shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, but his eyes were filled with a deep sadness that belied his casual demeanor. It was 2 years ago. I still miss her. She used to help me with homework, too. She was good at it. Like you. I bet she was even better. Maybe. He gave a small smile. But you're funnier. Mama didn't make up songs about verbs. From the doorway, a voice said quietly, No, she didn't. Sophia and Luca both turned. Lorenzo was standing there, and Sophia had no idea how long he had been watching them. Papa. Sophia taught me how to say hello in 10 languages. Lorenzo's expression was softer than Sophia had ever seen it. Did she show him? Luca asked eagerly. Lorenzo walked into the room, and Luca proceeded to butcher greetings in a bunch of different languages. But Lorenzo didn't correct him. He just watched his son with something that almost looked like wonder. When Luca finished, Lorenzo ruffled his hair. Very impressive. Now go get cleaned up for lunch, and take all these papers with you. But now, Luca. The boy gathered his things reluctantly, then paused at the door. Sophia, will you come back to teach me more? Sophia glanced at Lorenzo, unsure. He gave a tiny nod. Sure, she said. I'd like that. Luca beamed and ran off, leaving them alone. Lorenzo sat down in the chair Luca had vacated. He hasn't smiled like that in months. He's a good kid. He is, Lorenzo said, his voice rough. His mother was better with him than I am. She knew how to make him happy. I just know how to keep him safe. Those aren't mutually exclusive, are they? He looked at her directly. In my world, they usually are. Sophia understood what he wasn't saying. This life, the guards, the walls, the constant danger, it was all to protect Luca, but it was also isolating him. He needs more than safety, she said quietly. He needs joy too. Lorenzo nodded slowly. I know. I just don't know how to give him that anymore. Maybe you don't have to do it alone. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. About those conditions, Lorenzo said, changing the subject. For working with me. Sophia pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote them down. He read them, his eyebrows rising. You want access to the library? And Thursdays off to volunteer at a literacy center? Is that a problem? No, it's just not what I expected. He folded the paper. Done. Anything else? Just one thing. If I'm going to work for you, I need to know you'll keep your word. No lies, no games. Lorenzo extended his hand. No lies, no games. Sophia shook it. And in that moment, she sealed her fate with the Vitali family. 2 weeks into working for Lorenzo, Sophia had translated 3 more deals, caught 2 contract errors, and somehow become Luca's unofficial language tutor. She'd also avoided every personal question Lorenzo asked her until tonight. It was past midnight. Lorenzo had called her for an emergency translation. A Russian supplier had issues with the shipment. The call had gone well. The problem was solved. But when Sophia stood to leave, Lorenzo stopped her. Stay, have a drink. I don't drink with clients. I'm your employer, not your client. There's a difference. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Anyway, besides, you've been dodging my questions for 2 weeks. I'm starting to think you're hiding something. Sophia reluctantly sat back down. I'm not hiding anything. I just value my privacy. In my experience, people who value privacy usually have secrets. Lorenzo slid a glass toward her. Why languages, Sophia? Of all the things you could have learned, why that? She stared at the amber liquid. Because they were free. What does that mean? Sophia took a breath. She told the story before to social workers and therapists who didn't really care. But something about the quiet room and Lorenzo's genuine curiosity made her speak. I grew up in foster care. 7 different homes between ages 5 and 18. Some were okay. Most weren't. She picked up the glass but didn't drink. The only constant was the library. Every home I lived in, I'd find the nearest library and camp out there. And you read language books. I read everything. But languages, they were an escape. When I learned Spanish, I could read Gabriel Garcia Marquez in the original text. When I learned French, I could understand Camus. Each language was like a door to a different world. Lorenzo listened, his expression unreadable. The group home I stayed in from 16 to 18 had a Russian woman working the night shift, Natasha. She'd sneak me books from her house, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Pushkin. We'd practice together during her breaks. Sophia smiled at the memory. She said I had a gift for it, that I thought like a translator, not just a student. What does that mean? It means I don't just learn words. I learn how people think. Every language has a personality, a rhythm. Japanese is formal, layered with respect and hierarchy. Russian is passionate, built for literature and emotion. Italian is musical. You can't just translate word for word. You have to translate meaning, context, feeling. Lorenzo leaned back, studying her. That's why you're so good at the meetings. You're not just repeating what people say, you're interpreting what they mean. Exactly. So, you learned 10 languages from library books and a Russian night nurse. There it was, the skepticism she'd been waiting for. Not just them. I had other teachers along the way. A Korean grocery store owner who let me practice in exchange for stocking shelves. An Italian chef who taught me while I washed dishes. A Chinese professor I met at the library who needed help organizing files. She met his eyes. When you have nothing, Mr. Vitali, you learn to trade what you can offer. I offered my time and attention. They offered knowledge. And that's it? That's the whole story? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. My world is built on blood, Sophia. Family blood, enemy blood, money that's been bled for. Everything I have came from violence or the threat of it. He paused. But you built your world from words, from books and conversations and kindness from strangers. That's different. Different bad or different good? I haven't decided yet. Sophia finally took a sip of the whiskey. It burned, but in a good way. You don't trust me. I don't trust anyone. Not even Vincent. Anthony, your own counsel? Especially not them. Lorenzo smiled, but it was cold. They're loyal because it benefits them. If that calculation changes, so does their loyalty. That's how this world works. Sounds lonely. It is, he said matter-of-factly that it hurt to hear. But it's also survival. Sophia set down her glass. Is that what you want for Luca? A lonely life where he can't trust anyone? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. I want him to be safe. Safe and isolated aren't the same thing. In my world, they are. Then maybe your world is wrong. The words hung in the air between them. Sophia expected anger, but Lorenzo just looked tired. You say you learned languages to escape, he said quietly. What were you escaping from? Sophia hesitated. This was the part she never told anyone. Emptiness. Every foster home I was temporary. Every family I was the extra kid, the one they took in for the check or because they felt obligated. She traced the rim of her glass. Languages gave me an identity when nothing else did. If I couldn't belong somewhere, at least I could understand everywhere. Lorenzo nodded slowly like he understood more than she'd said. And now, are you still escaping? No. Now I'm building something. That literacy center I volunteer at. I teach immigrants English, people who came here with nothing just like I had nothing. I help them find their words. That's why you wanted Thursdays off. That's why I wanted Thursdays off. Lorenzo poured himself another drink. You're a strange woman, Sophia Carter. You walked into my world by accident. And now you're saving my deals and teaching my son and making me question things I've never questioned before. Is that a complaint? It's an observation. He looked at her seriously. But here's mine. No orphan learns 10 languages without a reason. You say it was escape. And maybe that's true. But I think there's more to it. I think you're still running from something or towards something, and you're not telling me which. Sophia stood. Maybe you're right. Or maybe you're so used to everyone having ulterior motives that you can't recognize someone who just wants to survive. In my experience, survival is the biggest motive of all. She walked to the door, then turned back. Your son asked me today if I had a family. I told him I didn't. He said that was sad. And then he said, maybe you can share ours. You've built your world on blood, Mr. Vitali. But Luca's building his on something better. Don't ruin that for him. Lorenzo didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted. As Sophia left, she felt his eyes on her back, searching, questioning, trying to solve the mystery she represented. Let him search, she thought. Some stories were meant to stay buried, at least for now. Sophia was leaving the literacy center on Thursday evening when the black sedan pulled up beside her. Not Lorenzo's car. She'd learned to recognize those. This one was sleeker, more expensive, with tinted windows that reflected the streetlights. The back window rolled down. A man in his 50s sat inside wearing a suit that probably cost more than her rent. His silver hair was slicked back, and he had the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Miss Carter, would you spare a moment? Every instinct told Sophia to run. I don't know you. No, but I know you. Sophia Carter, age 26. Translator for Lorenzo Vitali. He opened the car door. Please, I only want to talk. 5 minutes of your time, and I promise you'll walk away richer for it. I'm not interested. Not even in $50,000? Sophia froze. That was more than she'd make in 2 years of delivery work. More than she'd ever had at once in her entire life. The man saw her hesitation and smiled wider. Just a conversation, Miss Carter. What's the harm? Against her better judgment, Sophia got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and cologne. Another man sat in the front passenger seat, silent and watchful. The driver didn't turn around. My name is Victor Calabrese, the silver-haired man said as the car pulled into traffic. I run operations in Brooklyn. Perhaps Lorenzo has mentioned me. The name clicked. The Calabrese family, the ones who'd wanted to borrow her for a meeting. The ones Lorenzo had refused. He mentioned you, Sophia said carefully. I'm sure he did. Lorenzo and I have a complicated relationship. We respect each other's territories, but we're not friends. Victor poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. However, I believe in recognizing talent when I see it. And you, Miss Carter, are quite talented. What do you want? Direct. I like that. Victor took a sip. I want to make you an offer. A generous one. You see, Lorenzo has an important meeting next week with some Korean distributors. A very lucrative deal. Something about expanded shipping routes. You'll be translating, I assume? Sophia said nothing. I'll take that as a yes. Here's my proposal. During that meeting you make a small error. Nothing too obvious. Perhaps you translate exclusive partnership as tentative arrangement. Or you soften Lorenzo's terms just enough that the Koreans walk away offended. Sophia's stomach turned. You want me to sabotage the deal? I want you to ensure it fails. In return, I'll pay you $50,000 cash. Untraceable. You can disappear tomorrow if you want. Start a new life somewhere Lorenzo Vitali will never find you. And why would you want his deal to fail? Victor's smile turned cold. Because those Korean distributors will need a new partner, and I'll be ready to step in. Lorenzo gets embarrassed. I get the contract, and you get enough money to never deliver Chinese food again. Everyone wins except Lorenzo. Victor leaned forward. Lorenzo Vitali has enough wins. He won't miss one deal. Think about it, Miss Carter. You don't owe him anything. You're not family. You're not even really his employee. You're a contractor he's using for your skills. Do you really think he'd hesitate to replace you if someone better came along? The words stung because they were partially true. Lorenzo didn't trust her. His counsel wanted her gone. She was useful now, but for how long? I could make it $75,000, Victor pressed. Enough to leave New York entirely. California, maybe, or Europe. I'm sure someone with your language skills could find work anywhere. Sophia looked out the window. They were driving through Brooklyn, past neighborhoods she'd never been to. What happens if I say no? Nothing. You walk away. We never speak again. Victor's tone was casual, but his eyes were hard. Though I should mention other families have noticed you too. If you don't take my offer, someone else will make theirs, and they might not be as polite about it. Is that a threat? It's a reality. You've entered a world where loyalty is bought and sold, Miss Carter. The only question is, who are you loyal to? A man who doesn't trust you or yourself. The car stopped. They were back at the literacy center. Think about it, Victor said, handing her a card with nothing but a phone number. You have until Monday. Call me with your answer. Sophia took the card, her hand shaking slightly. She got out of the car and watched it drive away, disappearing into the night traffic. She could pay off the debts from her last foster home that still haunted her credit. She could get a real apartment instead of her studio with the leaking ceiling. She could stop working 3 jobs just to survive. All she had to do was betray Lorenzo. Sophia walked home slowly, the card burning in her pocket. She thought about Lorenzo's face when he talked about Luca. She thought about the way Luca had hugged her yesterday after she'd helped him with his homework, whispering, "Thank you for making Papa smile again." She thought about the look in Lorenzo's eyes when he'd asked about her past. Not suspicious, but curious, genuinely wanting to understand her. But she also thought about Victor's words. You don't owe him anything. It was true. She didn't. When Sophia got home, she pulled out the card and stared at it for a long time. Then she tore it into tiny pieces and flushed them down the toilet. But even as she did, doubt gnawed at her. Had she just refused $75,000 for a man who would probably discard her the moment she stopped being useful? Had she chosen loyalty to someone who didn't even trust her? Worse, would Lorenzo have done the same for her? Sophia lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. She'd made her choice. She wouldn't betray Lorenzo. But Victor's offer had revealed something she hadn't wanted to face. In this world, she would always be the person people tried to buy. The girl with no family, no connections, no power, just skills that could be purchased by the highest bidder. And that terrified her more than any threat could. The Korean meeting was set for Monday afternoon. Sophia arrived early, reviewing her notes and mentally preparing for the translation. She'd been working with Lorenzo for almost a month now, and these high-stakes negotiations were becoming routine. What wasn't routine was the way Lorenzo looked at her when she walked in. "We need to talk," he said, his voice flat. Sophia's heart skipped. "About what?" "Victor Calibris." The room suddenly felt smaller. "What about him?" Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "So, you do know who he is. You mentioned him before. The Brooklyn territory dispute. That's all you know about him?" Sophia kept her expression neutral, though her pulse was racing. "Should I know more?" Before Lorenzo could answer, Tony entered. "Boss, the Koreans are here 10 minutes early." Lorenzo held Sophia's gaze for another moment, then nodded. "We'll finish this later." The Korean delegation consisted of 3 men, led by Mr. Park, a stern-faced businessman who made Mr. Takahashi look warm by comparison. They settled around the table with minimal pleasantries. The meeting started smoothly. Sophia translated Lorenzo's proposals, navigating the complex terms of shipping routes and distribution percentages. Mr. Park seemed satisfied, his questions straightforward. Then one of his associates, a younger man with sharp eyes, leaned forward and spoke quietly in Korean. But he wasn't speaking to Mr. Park. He was speaking to Sophia. "I'm curious," he said in Korean, his tone conversational. "How long have you been working for the Calibris family?" Sophia's blood ran cold, but she kept her face neutral. "I don't work for them," she replied in Korean. "No? That's strange because I saw you getting into Victor Culibre's car 4 days ago, outside a literacy center in Queens. The room had gone silent. Lorenzo couldn't understand Korean, but he could read body language. What's he saying? Sophia's mind raced. If she translated truthfully, Lorenzo would know she'd met with Victor and hidden it from him. If she lied, and Lorenzo found out later, it would be even worse. The Korean associate smiled coldly and switched to English, his accent thick but understandable. I was just asking Miss Carter about her extracurricular activities. What activities? Lorenzo's voice was dangerous. Perhaps she should tell you herself. The man looked at Sophia. Or should I? Mr. Park spoke sharply in Korean, clearly telling his associate to be quiet. But the damage was done. Sophia, Lorenzo said quietly. What is he talking about? Before she could answer, Vincent burst into the room with Anthony and Michael, the entire council. Lorenzo, we need to speak now. I'm in a meeting now. Vincent's tone left no room for argument. Lorenzo stood, his jaw clenched. Excuse me for one moment, he told Mr. Park, then followed his counsel into the adjacent room. The door didn't close all the way. Sophia could hear every word. She's a spy, Michael hissed. We have confirmation. She met with Victor Culibris last Thursday. Got into his car, had a 20-minute conversation. How do you know this? Lorenzo's voice was controlled but barely. We've been watching her like you asked. And before you defend her, there's more. We checked her bank records. She deposited $10,000 the day after you hired her. I gave her that money, and you gave her another $10,000 2 weeks later. But 3 days ago, someone deposited $5,000 into her account. Cash. Untraceable. You want to guess who? Silence. Lorenzo. She's playing you, Vincent said, his voice almost pleading. Victor approached her, probably offered her money to sabotage your deals. And from what we're seeing, she took it. She wouldn't. Wouldn't she? Anthony interrupted. She's got no family, no loyalty, nothing tying her here except a paycheck. And Victor can pay better than you can. She's a liability. We told you this from the start. She will get you killed, Michael added. If not today, then tomorrow. How long until she mistranslates something that gets you arrested or worse? More silence. Sophia's hands were shaking. The $5,000, that was her literacy center's payment for teaching extra classes. She could prove it. But would Lorenzo even listen? When Lorenzo returned to the meeting room, his face was a mask. He sat down without looking at Sophia. Please continue, he told Mr. Park. The rest of the negotiation was torture. Sophia translated mechanically, her mind racing. The Korean associate kept watching her with that knowing smile. Lorenzo wouldn't meet her eyes, and when Mr. Park finally stood to leave, apparently satisfied with the terms, Sophia felt no relief. As soon as the Koreans left, Lorenzo turned to her. My office now. Tony and 2 other guards followed them. Not a good sign. Lorenzo's office felt like a courtroom. He sat behind his desk while Sophia stood, flanked by guards like a criminal. The $5,000, Lorenzo said. Where did it come from? The literacy center. I taught extra classes. Prove it. Sophia pulled out her phone with shaking hands, showing him the email confirmation from the center's director. Lorenzo read it, his expression unreadable. And Victor Culibris? Here it was, the moment of truth. He approached me Thursday night, offered me money to sabotage your Korean deal. The room erupted. Vincent swore. Anthony moved toward her, but Lorenzo raised a hand. How much? Lorenzo asked quietly. And you didn't think to tell me? I refused him. I tore up his card and came here today to do my job. You should have told me the moment it happened. Lorenzo's voice was cold. Instead, you hid it. You met with my enemy in secret and said nothing. I didn't want to worry you. You didn't want to. Lorenzo stood abruptly. Do you understand what you've done? You've made me look like a fool. My counsel thinks you're a traitor. The Koreans probably think you're a spy, and I can't defend you because you lied to me. I didn't lie. I just didn't. Omission is still a lie. He looked at her with something like disappointment. I trusted you with my business, with my son, and you kept secrets. Sophia felt tears burning her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I kept the secret because I knew how it would look. I knew you'd doubt me just like you're doing now. Then you should have given me a reason not to. The words hit like a slap. Lorenzo turned to his guards. Take her home and watch her. If she tries to contact Victor or anyone else, I want to know immediately. Lorenzo, Sophia started. We're done for today. He wouldn't look at her. I need to think about whether we're done permanently. As the guards escorted her out, Sophia caught Vincent's expression. He looked almost triumphant. She'd refused $75,000 to stay loyal to Lorenzo, and now he was treating her like the traitor she'd refused to become. 3 days had passed since the Korean meeting. 3 days of silence from Lorenzo. Sophia had been confined to translation work over the phone. No more in-person meetings. No more access to the estate. The guards still watched her apartment. A constant reminder that she was one wrong move from disappearing. Then on Friday night at 11 o'clock, her phone rang. It's me. Lorenzo's voice was rough, tired. Can you come to the house now? Luca's asking for you. He won't sleep. I've tried everything. Sophia's heart clenched. What's wrong? Can you come? 20 minutes later, Tony led her into the estate without a word. The house was dark except for a light glowing from the library. She found Luca curled up in one of the oversized leather chairs, his eyes red from crying. Lorenzo sat nearby, looking helpless in a way she'd never seen before. Sophia. Luca jumped up and ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. You came back. Of course I did. She knelt down to his level. What's going on, kiddo? I had a bad dream about Mama. Papa said I could pick any book and he'd read to me, but none of them are right. His voice cracked. I want the one Mama used to read, the French one with the little prince. Sophia's throat tightened. Le Petit Prince? Luca nodded miserably. But I can't find it, and Papa doesn't read French good, and I just want. He dissolved into fresh tears. Hey, it's okay. Sophia held him close. I know that book. I can read it to you. You can. Of course. It's one of my favorites. She looked at Lorenzo over Luca's head. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Sophia found the book on a high shelf, a beautiful old edition with watercolor illustrations. She settled into the chair with Luca curled against her side and began to read in French, translating key passages into English so he could understand. Lorenzo sat in the chair across from them, watching in silence. Luca's breathing gradually slowed. His grip on Sophia's hand loosened. By the 3rd chapter, he was asleep. I'll carry him to bed, Lorenzo said quietly. He scooped up his son with practiced ease, and Sophia followed them upstairs. Luca's room was exactly what she'd imagined. Shelves full of toys he was too old for, posters of soccer players, a nightlight shaped like a moon. Lorenzo tucked him in, brushing the dark curls from his forehead with a gentleness that made Sophia's chest ache. Stay, Luca mumbled, half asleep. Both of you, please. Lorenzo sat on the edge of the bed. Sophia hesitated, then sat in the chair by the window. They stayed until Luca's breathing turned deep and even. Outside in the hallway, Lorenzo finally spoke. Thank you. He's been having nightmares all week. Nothing I did helped. He just needed to feel close to her memory. The book was his connection. And you knew it. Lorenzo leaned against the wall. Exhaustion etched across his face. You always know what he needs. Better than I do. That's not true. It is. He looked at her directly. Can we talk honestly? They ended up back in the library. Lorenzo poured 2 drinks. Whiskey for him, wine for her. The fire had burned down to embers, casting shadows across the room. I had you investigated, Lorenzo said without preamble. After Victor's approach, my people went back to every foster home. Every job, every person you've ever known. Sophia's stomach dropped. And you're exactly who you said you are. The 5,000 was from the literacy center. You really did learn languages from books and borrowed teachers. You're not a spy, not a plant, not anything except, he paused, except someone who survived against terrible odds. Why are you telling me this? Because I owe you an apology. I treated you like a criminal when you were just trying to protect yourself. Lorenzo took a drink. Victor is dangerous. If you told me about his offer, I would have made it worse. I would have confronted him, started a war. You were smart to handle it quietly. Your counsel doesn't think so. My counsel thinks everything is a threat. He set down his glass. But they're not wrong about one thing. You are dangerous, just not in the way they think. What does that mean? Lorenzo stood, moving to the window. It means my son loves you. It means you've gotten inside our lives in a way no one has since his mother died. And it means... He stopped, his jaw tightening. You what? He turned to face her. I trust you, Sophia. Despite every instinct telling me not to. Despite my counsel's warnings. Despite the fact that trust in my world gets people killed. I trust you. Sophia stood, her pulse racing. Lorenzo, I know it's insane. You've been here a month. You're not family. You're not one of us. My counsel would riot if they knew I was saying this. He moved closer. But when I watched you with Luca tonight, reading to him in his mother's favorite book, making him feel safe, I realized something. What? That you're good for us. For him. Maybe even for me. His voice dropped. And that scares me more than any rival family ever could. They were standing close now. Close enough that Sophia could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. I'm just a delivery girl, she whispered. I don't belong in your world. No, you don't. Lorenzo reached out, his hand hovering near her face, but not quite touching. My world is violence and blood and broken loyalty. You're something else, something better. Your counsel will never accept you. I know. His hand dropped. But that doesn't change how I feel. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge. What are we doing? Sophia asked. I don't know. Lorenzo stepped back, putting necessary distance between them. But I know I don't want you to leave. Not the estate. Not Luca. Not. He didn't finish the sentence. Not you, Sophia finished softly. Their eyes met. Not me, Lorenzo confirmed. Sophia knew she should walk away. This was dangerous territory, more dangerous than any translation error or rival family. But when she looked at Lorenzo, she didn't see the Mafia boss everyone else saw. She saw a man trying desperately to be a good father, a man who carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, a man who'd let her in despite every reason not to. I should go, she said, though she didn't move. You should. Lorenzo agreed, not moving either. Neither of them did. Finally, Lorenzo walked her to the door. As she left, he caught her hand. Sophia, whatever happens with the council, with the other families, with any of this, you're under my protection now. No one touches you. Understand? She nodded, not trusting her voice. As she drove home, Sophia's hand still tingled where Lorenzo had held it. She was falling for him. A Mafia boss. A man whose world was everything she'd tried to escape. And somehow that felt like the most honest thing she'd done in years. The call came during Luca's soccer practice on Saturday afternoon. Lorenzo was in a meeting when his phone lit up with a video message from an unknown number. The footage showed Luca sitting in what looked like a warehouse, scared but unharmed. A distorted voice spoke over the image. The delivery girl makes you weak, Vitali. Get rid of her or lose what matters most. The video ended. Lorenzo's blood turned to ice. He was already calling his security team when Sophia walked in for their scheduled translation session. One look at his face, and she knew something was catastrophically wrong. What happened? They took Luca. Lorenzo's voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. Victor Calabresi's men grabbed him from soccer practice 15 minutes ago. Sophia's world tilted. No, this is my fault. This is Victor's fault. Lorenzo was already moving, strapping on a shoulder holster. Tony traced the video to a warehouse in Red Hook. I'm leaving now. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. He knows me. If he's scared, seeing me might help, Sophia said, her voice with steel. And if this is about me, then I should be there. Lorenzo looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Stay behind me. Do exactly what I say. If shooting starts, you run. Understood? Understood. The drive to Red Hook took 23 minutes. Lorenzo made calls the entire way, mobilizing his men, coordinating positions, his voice never rising above a controlled murmur. Sophia sat beside him, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. He'll be okay, she whispered, maybe to Lorenzo, maybe to herself. He has to be. They arrived to find the warehouse surrounded by Lorenzo's men. Tony met them at the perimeter, his expression grim. For hostages inside, plus Luca. There on the main floor, northeast corner. They know we're here. Sent out a message saying if we breach, the boy dies. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. Demands you alone to discuss terms. It's a trap, Vincent said, appearing from behind a truck. They'll kill you both. I don't care. Lorenzo checked his weapon. I'm going in. Wait. Sophia grabbed his arm. Let me go first. Every man turned to stare at her. They want you dead, she continued quickly. But they want me gone. If I walk in, offer to leave New York, maybe they'll take the deal and release Luca. They'll kill you, Lorenzo said flatly. Maybe. But maybe they'll hesitate long enough for your men to get into position. She met his eyes. I got him into this. Let me help get him out. Lorenzo started to refuse, but Tony interrupted. Boss, she's right. If she walks in unarmed, hands visible, they might lower their guard. We can use the distraction. Every instinct in Lorenzo's body screamed against it, but Luca's life was at stake. You wear a vest, he said finally, and you do exactly what I tell you through the earpiece. The second things go wrong, you hit the floor. 5 minutes later, Sophia was walking toward the warehouse entrance, her heart hammering so hard she could barely breathe. The earpiece was tiny, invisible. The bulletproof vest was hidden under her jacket. I can hear you, Lorenzo's voice said in her ear. My men are in position. You're not alone. The warehouse door was open. Sophia stepped inside. I'm here, she called out. I'm unarmed. I just want to talk. 3 men emerged from the shadows, guns drawn. In the corner, tied to a chair, was Luca. His eyes went wide when he saw her. Sophia, he cried out. I'm here, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay. One of the men, tall, scarred, with cold eyes, stepped forward. Sophia Carter. Victor said you were brave. Stupid, but brave. I'll leave, Sophia said quickly. Tonight, I'll get on a plane and never come back to New York. Just let the boy go. The man laughed. You think this is about you? Victor doesn't care if you stay or go. This is about sending Vitali a message. And messages written in blood are the ones people remember. He raised his gun toward Luca. Sophia didn't think. She ran. The gunshot was deafening. She felt the bullet hit her vest, stealing her breath, but she didn't stop. She threw herself between Luca and the gunman just as the windows exploded inward. Lorenzo's men came through every entrance at once. Gunfire erupted. Sophia covered Luca's body with her own, feeling him trembling beneath her. Close your eyes, she whispered. Don't look. I've got you. The firefight lasted maybe 30 seconds, but it felt like hours. When silence finally fell, Sophia's ears were ringing, and her chest was on fire from the bullet impact. Clear? Tony's voice. Then Lorenzo was there, pulling her up, checking her for injuries. Are you hit? The vest caught it. Sophia's hands shook as she helped untie Luca. The boy launched himself at her, sobbing. I was so scared. I thought they were going to hurt you. I'm okay. We're both okay. Sophia held him tight, ignoring the pain in her ribs. Lorenzo knelt beside them, his hand on Luca's back. Their eyes met over the boy's head, a moment of shared terror and relief. You jumped in front of a bullet, Lorenzo said quietly. I couldn't let them hurt him. 2 of the gunmen were dead. 1 was wounded. The scarred man had escaped through a back exit, but Lorenzo's men were already pursuing. As they walked out of the warehouse, Luca refused to let go of Sophia's hand. In the car, he curled up between them, still shaking. "Don't let them send her away, Papa," he whispered. "Please, she saved me. She's family now." Lorenzo looked at Sophia over his son's head. She had a bruise forming on her cheek. Her clothes were torn, and there would be a massive contusion on her chest from the bullet impact. But her eyes were clear and steady. She'd proven her loyalty, not with words, but with blood. "Nobody's sending her anywhere," Lorenzo said firmly. "She stays for as long as she wants." Luca smiled through his tears and held both their hands. And for the first time since his mother died, he felt completely safe. The emergency council meeting was called for Sunday morning. Sophia wasn't supposed to be there, but Lorenzo had insisted she attend. She sat in the corner while the 6 council members filed in, their faces ranging from angry to furious. Vincent slammed the door. "Have you lost your mind?" "Good morning to you too," Lorenzo said coldly. "Don't," Vincent pointed at him, "don't act like this is normal. Your son was kidnapped because of her. Because you made us look weak by keeping some random girl with no family, no connections." "She took a bullet for my son," Lorenzo interrupted. "She should have never been in a position where she needed to." Anthony stood, his face red. "This is exactly what we warned you about. You brought an outsider into our business, and now the other families smell blood." Michael nodded. Victor made his message clear. "The delivery girl makes you weak." "And he's right, Lorenzo. Every family in New York is watching this, wondering when Lorenzo Vitali started letting women he barely knows dictate his decisions." "She doesn't dictate anything." "Then prove it." Vincent leaned forward. "Send her away tonight. Give her money. Relocate her if you want, but get her out of New York before this escalates into a full war." Lorenzo's eyes went dark. "No." The room exploded. "Are you serious?" Michael shouted. "Your son was tied to a chair with a gun to his head because of Victor Calabrese, not Sophia. Victor used her as an excuse." Anthony slammed his hand on the table. "But he's not wrong. You've changed since she arrived. You're distracted. You defend her over your own counsel. You trust her with information we've earned through decades of loyalty. She's earned my trust, too. In 1 month." Vincent's voice rose. "Lorenzo, we've been with you for 15, 20 years. Some of us fought alongside your father. We've bled for this family. And you're going to throw that away for a girl you met because she delivered orange chicken?" Sophia felt each word like a physical blow. They weren't entirely wrong. She had disrupted everything. Luca's kidnapping was because of her presence, no matter how Lorenzo spun it. "You want to talk about loyalty?" Lorenzo stood, his voice deadly quiet. "Where were you when Marcus was losing us millions? Where were you when the Japanese deal almost collapsed? Sophia fixed in 1 hour what you couldn't fix in years." "She's not one of us," Vincent roared. "Maybe that's exactly what we need." The room went silent. Lorenzo continued, his voice cutting. "You know what I see when I look at this council? I see men who've gotten comfortable, complacent. You follow tradition because it's easy, not because it's right. You want to keep doing business the way my father did, my grandfather did. But times change. So are we not good enough anymore?" Michael's voice was bitter. "I didn't say that, but maybe it's time we evolved." Lorenzo gestured to Sophia. "She sees things we don't. She thinks differently, and yes, she's an outsider, but that's her strength, not her weakness." "Her strength nearly got Luca killed," Anthony said quietly. That hit home. Lorenzo's jaw clenched, and for a moment he had no response. "She also saved him," he finally said. "Threw herself in front of a bullet without hesitation. How many of you would have done the same?" "That's different, and you know it," Vincent said. "We're soldiers." "She's what? A woman? An orphan?" "Not Italian." Lorenzo's eyes flashed. "Say what you really mean, Vincent." Vincent met his stare. "Fine. She's nobody. No family name, no reputation, no blood ties to our world. If you marry her tomorrow, she's still nobody. And the other families will never respect a boss who elevates a nobody above his own council. Then they don't have to respect me. They just have to fear me, Lorenzo said. Vincent's voice softened slightly. I'm trying to protect you. We all are. This path you're on, it ends badly. Either Victor kills her to prove a point, or you start a war defending her, or the other councils lose faith and you lose your position. There's no version of this where keeping her doesn't cost you everything. Lorenzo walked to the window, his back to the room. Sophia could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of the decision crushing him. Maybe you're right, he said quietly. Sophia's heart sank. Maybe keeping her will cost me everything. Lorenzo turned around. But here's what I know. My son hasn't smiled in 2 years. Since his mother died, he's been a ghost in his own house. Then Sophia showed up, and suddenly he's laughing again, learning, feeling safe. Isn't that enough of a reason? That's not enough reason. Michael started. I'm not finished. Lorenzo's voice with steel. Beyond Luca, she's proven herself over and over. She's smart, capable, and loyal. She refused $75,000 from Victor to betray me. How many people in this room would have done the same? No one answered. So, here's my decision. Lorenzo looked at each council member in turn. Sophia stays. She has my full protection. If anyone, and I mean anyone, tries to harm her, they answer to me. If the other families have a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly. And if we refuse to accept this? Vincent asked. Lorenzo's expression was cold. Then you're free to leave. All of you. I'll build a new council from scratch before I let you dictate who I trust. The silence was deafening. Vincent stood slowly. You'd choose her over us? Over 15 years of brotherhood? I'm choosing what's best for my family, and right now that includes her. One by one, the council members stood and left. Vincent was last, pausing at the door. I hope she's worth it, Lorenzo. Because you just bet everything on her. The door closed. Lorenzo and Sophia were alone. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. Yes, I did. Lorenzo turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Vulnerability. They're not wrong about everything. You are dangerous to me, but not in the way they think. How then? You make me want things I can't have. A normal life. A family that isn't built on violence. A future where my son doesn't have to inherit an empire of blood. He moved closer. You make me want to be better than I am. Sophia's throat tightened. Don't say you're just a delivery girl. You're so much more than that. Lorenzo's hand found hers. And I just burned every bridge with my counsel to prove it. What if they're right? What if I cost you everything? Then at least it'll be my choice. He squeezed her hand, not theirs. Sophia realized in that moment that Lorenzo hadn't just defended her. He'd chosen her over tradition, over counsel, over everything he'd been taught about how his world worked. And that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. The meeting with the Japanese syndicate was scheduled for Wednesday. The biggest deal Lorenzo had ever negotiated. $50 million in expanded distribution rights across the entire East Coast. Mr. Takahashi was bringing his entire board of directors, and the contract would cement the Vitali family's dominance for the next decade. It would also make them a target. Extra security, Lorenzo told Tony on Tuesday night. I want every guard we have on rotation. No one gets in without being cleared twice. Already done, boss. Tony hesitated. The council still isn't happy about Sophia being lead translator. The council can voice their concerns after we close this deal. Wednesday morning arrived cold and gray. Sophia dressed carefully, professional but not flashy. She'd reviewed the contract terms a dozen times, memorizing every clause and contingency. This meeting couldn't fail. When she arrived at the estate, the atmosphere was tense. Guards lined every hallway. Vincent and the other council members sat in the adjacent room watching through one-way glass. They'd been effectively sidelined, but Lorenzo had allowed them to observe as a gesture of respect. Mr. Takahashi arrived with 7 associates, all wearing identical dark suits. The delegation was larger than usual, a sign of how important this deal was to them as well. The meeting began smoothly. Sophia translated the pleasantries, the formal greetings, the careful dance of high-stakes negotiation. Mr. Takahashi seemed pleased with the terms Lorenzo presented. Then one of the new guards, a man Sophia didn't recognize, brought in tea service. He set the tray down, poured for the Japanese delegation first as protocol dictated, then moved to Lorenzo's side. Something felt wrong. Sophia couldn't pinpoint what, but her instincts were screaming. The guard's movements were too careful, too deliberate, and when he poured Lorenzo's tea, his hand shook slightly. Mr. Takahashi began speaking about profit percentages. Sophia translated, but part of her mind was still on that guard, now standing by the wall with the others. Then, Mr. Takahashi's senior advisor, an older man who'd been silent until now, leaned forward and spoke in rapid Japanese. But something was off. His phrasing was strange, the sentence structure awkward, like he was reading from a script. Sophia's mind raced. She'd worked with this man before during previous negotiations. His Japanese was always flawless, eloquent. This sounded coached. She translated what he'd said. We propose a 60-40 split on East Coast distribution with the Vitali family handling all enforcement. Lorenzo frowned. That's less than we discussed. The original terms were 50-50. The advisor spoke again in Japanese, and Sophia's blood ran cold because he just said something completely different than what she translated. He'd said, we propose a 40-60 split with enforcement remaining our responsibility. Someone had told him to say one thing in Japanese and expect Sophia to translate it as something else. They were trying to make her sabotage the deal by making Lorenzo reject terms he'd actually want. But who and why? Then she saw it. The nervous guard was watching her intently, waiting for her translation, and his hand was resting on his weapon in a way that wasn't quite casual. Sophia made a split-second decision. Excuse me, she said in Japanese, addressing Mr. Takahashi directly. May I clarify something? I want to make sure I understood your advisor correctly. Mr. Takahashi nodded, slightly confused. Sophia repeated back exactly what the advisor had said in Japanese. Then she said in English, because what he stated in Japanese was a 40-60 split with enforcement remaining your responsibility. But the context of this negotiation suggests he meant 60-40 with enforcement transferring to the Vitali family. Which did you intend? The room went very quiet. Mr. Takahashi's eyes narrowed. He turned to his advisor and spoke sharply. The advisor went pale, stammering in Japanese. He clearly hadn't expected Sophia to repeat his exact words back. Mr. Takahashi's response was cold and clipped. He stood abruptly, his entire delegation rising with him. What's happening? Lorenzo demanded. Your instincts were correct to be cautious, Mr. Vitali. Mr. Takahashi said in English, his accent thick but clear. It appears someone attempted to sabotage our negotiation. My advisor has been compromised. The advisor was sweating now, speaking rapidly in Japanese. Mr. Takahashi cut him off with a gesture, then turned to Lorenzo. He claims he was approached. Yesterday, someone was paid to create a mistranslation design to make you refuse our terms, thereby insulting us and ending the partnership. Lorenzo's expression darkened. Paid by whom? Before anyone could answer, the jittery guard made a move. His hand went for his weapon, but he wasn't aiming at the Japanese delegation. He was aiming at Sophia. She's too smart, he shouted out loud. Victor interjected. If she caught on, I should have. He never finished that sentence. Tony's bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around violently. His gun clattered loudly to the floor as other guards swarmed him immediately. Lorenzo was already moving swiftly, pulling Sophia protectively behind him, his own weapon drawn and ready. But the immediate threat was over. The guard was on the ground, groaning in agony, a pool of blood quickly spreading beneath him. Victor Calibri, Lorenzo said, his voice dripping with lethal intent. He bribed my guard and your advisor. Mr. Takahashi's face was like stone, completely unreadable. This is an insult to both of our families. Agreed, Lorenzo confirmed, holstering his weapon. Which is why I propose we finish this deal, then deal with Victor together as a united front. Mr. Takahashi considered this proposition, then nodded slowly in agreement. Your translator saved both our reputations today and possibly our very lives. I am deeply impressed. They sat back down to resume the negotiations. The compromised advisor was escorted out unceremoniously by Takahashi's men. His fate clearly sealed and grim. Lorenzo's wounded guard was dragged away for medical attention by Tony, and Sophia, still visibly shaking from how narrowly she'd avoided a bullet, translated the remainder of the negotiation flawlessly, without a single misstep. By the time Mr. Takahashi and his delegation left 2 hours later, they'd not only salvaged the entire deal, they'd actually improved it significantly. 60-40 in Lorenzo's favor, plus a mutual defense pact against any further actions by the Calibri family. When the Japanese delegation was completely gone, Lorenzo turned his full attention to Sophia. You caught it, he said, referring to the mistranslation attempt. His phrasing was a little off. I knew something was off and didn't sit right with me, she replied modestly. You saved my life, Lorenzo stated firmly. Again, Lorenzo pulled her close possessively right there in front of the remaining guards and his council, who were all watching intently through the glass. Do you understand the significance of what you did today? I was just doing my job, sir, Sophia replied. No, Lorenzo insisted. You proved that you truly belong here, not just as a translator, but as... He paused, searching for the precise word he wanted to use. As family. Through the one-way glass, Sophia could clearly see the council members. Vincent's expression was completely unreadable, giving nothing away, but the others looked different now, not fully accepting, not yet, but perhaps seriously considering the possibility. Victor's going to retaliate, Sophia said quietly, voicing her concern. Let him try, Lorenzo replied, his eyes hardening with determination. He just made this extremely personal. As they left the conference room, Sophia realized that something had fundamentally shifted in their relationship. She'd proven her loyalty beyond any doubt. Now, the biggest question was, what came next in this strange new life? Lorenzo called a formal gathering for Friday night. Not just his own council, but representatives from every major family in New York. The Calabrese, the Russos, the Griots, even families from as far away as Boston and Philadelphia, sent their most trusted emissaries. The Vitalia Estate's grand ballroom hadn't seen this many people gathered together in one place since Lorenzo's father's funeral. Sophia stood in Lorenzo's office, watching the arrivals through the large window. What exactly is this? She asked, genuinely curious. A statement, Lorenzo replied simply, adjusting his expensive tie in the mirror. He was wearing a sleek black suit that probably cost more than her beat-up old car. After what Victor tried to pull, the families need to understand exactly where things stand. And where do they stand now? He turned to face her directly. You'll see, he promised. Downstairs, the ballroom buzzed with palpable tension. Council members from different families clustered in small corners, whispering conspiratorially among themselves. Sophia recognized Victor Calibri immediately. With his distinctive silver hair and cold, calculating smile, he stood with his people as if he owned the entire room. When Lorenzo entered the ballroom with Sophia beside him, all the whispers abruptly stopped. Vincent and Lorenzo's own council sat at the head table, their expressions carefully neutral and guarded. Luca was safely upstairs with his nanny, kept away from the potentially dangerous proceedings. Lorenzo took his position confidently at the podium. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice resonating through the room. I know there's been a lot of speculation surrounding recent events. The incident involving my son, the failed attempt to sabotage the deal, the shifting alliances. He paused deliberately, letting his words sink in. Tonight, I'm going to clarify exactly where the Vitali family stands in all of this. Victor leaned back casually in his chair, smirking derisively. First, regarding Victor Calibri, Lorenzo began, his voice turning icy cold. Your pathetic attempt to sabotage my Japanese partnership utterly failed. Your bribe guard is currently singing like a canary to the FBI as we speak, and your territory in Red Hook, as of this morning, is now officially mine. The other families have already recognized and sanctioned the transfer." Victor's smirk completely vanished from his face. He started to rise angrily from his chair, but the men surrounding him, representatives from the other powerful families, remained seated firmly, signaling their disapproval. The message was crystal clear. He was completely alone in this. "You kidnapped my son," Lorenzo continued, his voice rising slightly with controlled anger. "You tried to have my people killed. You violated every single code that we live by in this world. Consider this your only warning, Victor. Come at me or mine again in any way, shape, or form, and there won't be a third chance for you." The room was utterly silent. Every eye fixed on Lorenzo. Lorenzo's gaze swept across all the gathered families. "But I didn't call you all here tonight solely to discuss Victor's failures and transgressions. I called you here to discuss the future of the Vitali family. Specifically, a decision that I've made that some of you may find a little unconventional." Sophia's heart started to race nervously in her chest. "For the past 2 months, I've had the distinct privilege of working closely with someone extraordinary. Someone who single-handedly saved a failing deal with the Takahashi Syndicate. Someone who recovered $8 million in lost profit. Someone who prevented a sabotage attempt that would have completely destroyed our East Coast distribution network." He gestured towards Sophia, clearly indicating who he was talking about. Sophia Carter. Most of you have certainly heard of her by now. The delivery girl. The complete outsider. The one my own counsel vehemently warned me would get me killed. Vincent shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "They were right about one thing, though," Lorenzo conceded. "She is an outsider. She has no prestigious family name, no valuable blood connections, absolutely no history in our world." Lorenzo's voice grew even stronger, filled with unwavering conviction. "But here's what she does have. Loyalty that can't possibly be bought or swayed. Raw intelligence that saved my entire empire. And unwavering courage that saved my son's life when she willingly took a bullet meant for him." Gasps of shock and surprise rippled through the entire room. "So today, right here and now, I'm making a formal announcement that will take immediate effect," Lorenzo said, looking directly at his council members. "Effective immediately, Sophia Carter is my official advisor and my voice. In any and all negotiations, her word carries the same weight and authority as my own. In any meeting, her judgment holds equal authority and consideration. She will have full access to all family operations, the full and complete protection of the Vitali name, and a seat at my table above all others." The room erupted immediately in loud protests. "You can't possibly be serious, Lorenzo," someone shouted incredulously from the crowd. "She's a nobody," another voice called out angrily. Victor stood up abruptly, his face red with rage. "You're elevating a waitress above your own lieutenants, above men who've bled for this family for decades." "I'm elevating someone who's actually earned it," Lorenzo stated calmly. "Something that not all of you can truthfully claim." Vincent rose slowly from his seat. The room quieted almost instantly, waiting anxiously for his response. He'd been Lorenzo's closest and most trusted friend, his most reliable advisor for years. If he rejected this decision publicly, it would inevitably split the family and its alliances. He looked at Sophia intently for a long moment, then turned his gaze to Lorenzo. Finally, he nodded just once, almost imperceptible, but it was undoubtedly enough. "The Vitali Council fully supports this decision," Vincent said, though his voice was clearly strained and reluctant. "Miss Carter has proven herself worthy in countless ways." One by one, the other council members slowly stood up in agreement. Anthony, Michael, and the rest of them. Some looked visibly angry and resentful, some simply resigned to the situation, but all of them stood to show their reluctant support. The other families watched the entire scene unfold in stunned silence. Lorenzo extended his hand to Sophia, offering it to her. She hesitantly took it, stepping forward on shaking legs. The room stared intently at her. At this ordinary girl who'd walked in with a delivery of orange chicken one day and somehow drastically changed everything about their lives. Anyone who has a problem with this decision can take it up with me directly, Lorenzo stated firmly. But understand this clearly. She is under my complete and unwavering protection. She is Vitali now, and anyone who forgets that fact will answer directly to me. The gathering slowly dispersed, whispers and murmurs following in its wake. Victor left without saying another word, utterly defeated and thoroughly humiliated. As the room emptied, Luca suddenly appeared in the doorway. He'd snuck out of his room to watch the proceedings. He ran straight to Sophia, wrapping his little arms tightly around her waist. "Does this mean you're staying with us forever now?" he asked hopefully, looking up at her with wide, innocent eyes. Sophia looked at Lorenzo, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yeah, kiddo," she said softly. "I think it definitely does." Lorenzo took her other hand gently in his. The three of them stood there together, a makeshift family. A delivery girl, a powerful mafia boss, and a little boy who tragically lost his mother, but perhaps found something resembling family again in the most unlikely of places. Sophia smiled shyly and uncertainly, but her smile was genuine and heartfelt. She'd come to deliver food and unexpectedly ended up delivering herself into a completely new and unimaginable life. A life built not on blood ties or inherited tradition, but on fierce loyalty, unwavering support, and personal choice. The council might never fully accept her as one of their own. The other powerful families might always whisper behind her back, but she had Luca's unconditional trust, Lorenzo's fierce protection, and a permanent place in the Vitali family that no one could ever take away from her. For a girl who'd grown up belonging nowhere, she'd finally found her home.